the Amazon, one of the most dangerous places on Earth, where in just minutes an ordinary trip can turn into a fight for survival. A city programmer found himself alone in the heart of the jungle after a boat accident. A wound, piranhas, infection, hunger, even a jaguar. He had no gear, no food, no help. Only the jungle, testing him every single day. This is the story of a man who survived where 9 out of 10 would have no chance. Damian had arrived in the region just days before the disaster. His friend, a wildlife photographer, was supposed to join him, but stayed home sick. The tour was already paid for, so Damian decided to go anyway. His guide was a local man named Ricardo, who owned a motorboat known as a peak for its distinctive sound. The river was their only road. Around them stretched an endless green wall of vines, trees, humid air, and constant insect bites. For someone from the city, even the first hours felt like a trial, but with a guide the journey seemed under control. On the third day the sky suddenly darkened. In the jungle, storms don't warn you. They don't creep slowly over the horizon. They hit all at once. First came a gust of wind ripping at the surface of the water. Then a wave that pushed the boat sideways. Next, a crack so sharp it made your teeth clench. Trees bent in strange directions, branches crashed down from the canopy, and the air grew thick as the light turned green, like the glow through bottle glass. "Head for the shore," Ricardo shouted. He turned the bow, but the current was already dragging them toward a graveyard of debris, logs, branches, everything hidden under the dark water. The motor roared like a tired animal, offering no promise of escape. Damian pulled at his life vest, but couldn't fasten the buckle in time. A violent gust slammed the side of the boat, throwing it off course. From beneath the bow a dark log surged upward like the back of a giant fish. Time shattered in an instant. The deafening crack of splintering would mixed with the howl of the wind. The boat plunged nose first, and water flooded inside in a single breath. Damian was thrown hard. His back slammed against the bench, his knee against the side, and then he plunged into the water. It was shockingly cold, unnatural for such a scorching day, and it stole the rhythm from his lungs. A sharp pain tore through his left leg as if he'd been shot. He jerked instinctively, but the movement only ripped the wound wider. Blood poured fast, spreading into a red halo on the surface. The river devoured it hungrily, and that sight brought real terror, because piranhas don't ask questions. "Ricardo," he screamed, his throat raw as water filled his mouth. Around him was only noise and steel-like rain. No answer. Through the chaos, Damian spotted the dark belly of the overturned boat. He clawed at the slick wood, scraping his elbows, kicking desperately with his good leg until he managed to push himself onto the hull. His heart pounded like it was trying to break free from his chest. The wound on his shin gaped open like a mouth, the torn edges of skin raw and exposed. The taste of iron filled his mouth, his fingers trembled, and the relentless rain made everything slick and shining. He wrapped a wet t-shirt around his leg, pulling it as tight as he could. Almost immediately, hot sticky blood seeped through the fabric. Somewhere nearby a branch snapped, and the boat jolted sharply as the current pushed it into a field of debris. The overturned hull floated like a cork, and that was its only advantage. It stayed on the surface, holding what little could still float. The shore was close, maybe 50 meters at most, but between him and land was a river full of what couldn't be seen. He remembered Ricardo's short lecture, "Go in the water only if you must." Piranhas love movement. Caimans love shadow and noise. Don't thrash without thought. He had no choice. The current was dragging the boat not toward shore, but out to the deeper channel that carried away even whole trees. If he didn't try now, he would lose both the bank and his chance. He raised the whistle to his lips and blew 3 sharp bursts. The wind swallowed the sound in a second. No answer. Only the river hears, he thought, and felt a cold fear running down his back, mixing with the rain. One more look at the shore, a patch of lighter clay beneath a small drop-off, a spot where he might grab hold if luck stayed with him. Damian tore away one strip of tape from his dry bag, checked that it was sealed and clipped to his strap, took a deep breath, and slid into the water. The first impact wasn't water, it was pain. His leg flared open again at the touch of the cold. He inflated his vest just enough to keep his chest above water and worked his arms steadily, as if they were the only bridges between him and survival. He swam slowly, without splashing, using the rhythm he once saw in a rescue drill: long, smooth strokes, controlled breathing, brief pauses. His leg dragged like dead weight, each movement pulsing with heat. Blood still leaked into the current. At 20 meters, something brushed him. A thin branch hidden just under the surface scraped across his stomach. His heart shot to his throat. Not now, not here. He didn't look down. His eyes stayed locked on the clay line, the wet strip of bank that crept closer stroke by stroke. When his fingers finally touched the sticky, soft bottom, relief almost made him cry. The clay pulled at him, but it also held him. If he dug his hands in, he could drag himself up, centimeter by centimeter. He did, choking on rain, clawing into the mud until at last he dragged himself onto a narrow strip of land under the drop-off. For a few seconds he lay there, listening to the river's voice shift back to something natural, no longer a threat but simply itself. His first thought was bandaging. His second was rescue. But in the jungle, rescue meant only one thing. He crawled farther from the waterline, untied the shirt from his leg, and looked at the wound. The edges were jagged, the cut deep enough that the skin around it had already turned pale from the water. He pressed his palm above it, searching for the sharpest pain to pin down the artery, then tied the shirt tighter. Sliding a thin branch under the knot, he twisted until the pressure slowed the pulsing flow. It wasn't a cure, but it bought him time. The wind had died down, but the rain didn't stop. It turned finer, steadier, never-ending. The leaves that had whipped his face during the storm now hung motionless. The jungle breathed deep and heavy. Somewhere higher on the slope, monkeys called out, sharp and nervous. Do they always sound like that after a storm? Or did we just get added to their list of dangers? The thought flashed through Damian's mind, absurd but somehow true. Ricardo. Damian blew the whistle again. 3 short blasts. Then 2 long ones. Then a desperate string until he realized the whistle was only for someone nearby. And nearby there was nothing, only the smell of wet earth, rot, and the river that gave back what it took only when it wanted to. Panic pressed at his chest like an uninvited guest. It whispered, lie down. Wait. Maybe someone will pass on a trail. Maybe the boat will drift back. But in the jungle, logic is the only lifeline. The rules are simple. River water, no. Water from vines, yes. Fire, yes. Light, yes. Movement, only when planned. He looked around. At his feet lay scattered branches, a little drier under a leaning trunk. Above him, a cluster of broad leaves that could serve as a roof. His knife was still clipped to his belt. His lighter was soaked, but tinder, yes. In the bag, still dry. Damian scooped a handful of fibers from the heart of a rotting log, split a few thinner branches, and sheltered the bundle under the hanging leaves. A small dry cave, built with his own hands. The lighter clicked traitorously a few times, spitting out weak sparks. Again, and again. Finally, a thin wisp of smoke rose from the tinder. The flame caught, swallowed the fibers, and began to live. Fire in the jungle is more than warmth. It's the smell of human presence, a signal to the brain. You are not just another object among the roots. You are still a person. The flame glimmered weakly on his wet hands, and its reflection in his eyes was the first warmth he had felt in hours. The storm that had just raged was gone, leaving everything at once: broken branches, the scent of fresh cuts, and in the heavy air a sharp tension. The jungle hadn't gone silent. It had simply changed its tone. Instead of violent noise, there was now a steady hum, with single voices standing out. Somewhere a night bird creaked. Behind him something small scurried across the leaves, and high in the canopy the monkeys returned, not shrieking, but watchful. Damian sat and drank slowly, sipping water from a vine he had found under his hand. He memorized everything: the smell of wet bark, the taste of liquid pure as it filtered through a living tree, the rasp of his own breath, and how pain stepped back a few paces in the presence of fire. The whistle still sat in his pocket, but he didn't use it anymore. Pointless. If someone heard him, it wouldn't be by sound. He checked his bandage wet but holding. He tightened the stick another half turn, right up to the edge of endurance. Night was settling in slowly. The sky didn't darken all at once, but seemed to fill with ash until the jungle green turned darker, denser, heavier. And only the fire in his small shelter gave him the feeling that a line still existed between himself and the world around him. The first thought of death didn't come as a scream, but as a whisper. What if Ricardo never made it out? Damian pressed his temples against his knees and felt his office-trained logic kick back in cold, efficient, unsentimental. No facts. 2 tasks. Bleeding and warmth. Water and fire. Signals later. He didn't pray. He couldn't. But an image trembled before his eyes, his father in the kitchen, making tea by the window, and with it came the memory of a world where the worst danger was missing the bus. He clenched his teeth. If I want someone to remember this later, I have to survive now. Darkness in the jungle is not just darkness. It has sound. The soft, endless shhh of a million wings. The thin squeal of tiny creatures. Sudden bursts of trills that sound electric. Time breaks apart into pieces between those sounds. And if you stare at the fire long enough, it feels like dozens of other fires are glowing back at you, eyes watching in the dark. Damian fed thin branches into the flames. He breathed deep, teaching himself to count the fire 1, 2, 3, and between 3 and 1, he slipped into a brief daze, always pulled back by the next rustle. He didn't sleep. He was learning how to exist. When something heavy splashed into the river, his breath froze. Then came a faint scratching behind him, like someone carefully brushing against bark. "Don't leave the light," he whispered, and felt the words settle beside him like another tool for survival. The first night didn't end. It simply shifted into dawn, without deciding who was in control. Damian met that dawn alive, his leg bound tight, a small fire burning, and the realization that control wasn't something you brought from the city. Control was what you built from scraps, when everything around you wanted you gone. Then came fever. His body shivered violently, his skin burning hot as iron under the sun, though the sun was barely visible. He unwrapped the bandage. The wound looked worse now, red-rimmed, with the sour smell anyone knows after cutting themselves and leaving it untreated. The antiseptic, just a few drops left. This isn't a movie, he thought. And then he remembered a fragment from a documentary about a method that had once seemed barbaric. The rules of survival. He scratched them with his nail into the inside of a piece of bark. Don't risk for inches. Don't enter the water without reason. Don't touch what's colorful. Save the ember. Every evening, plan for morning. And then he added a 6th, like a prayer. Never stop moving. Even if it's just 3 more steps with a crutch. After many days of exhaustion, he walked along the river almost on autopilot. Then he heard it, the sound of a motor. A boat. Locals. He stumbled onto the shore, shouting, and fell to his knees. They pulled him in, gave him water, and covered him with cloth. He was saved. At the hospital, his body weighed 12 kilos less than before the journey. His wounds required surgery and long recovery. But the most important fact was simple: he had survived. Psychologically, he changed too. More than once in the jungle, he was ready to give up. But every time, he found a reason to keep going, even if it was just another sip of water or a few more inches gained. The Amazon had taken everything from Damian: his health, his strength, his confidence. But it gave him something greater: understanding. A person can endure far more than they ever imagine. In the civilized world, we believe we're strong because of technology. But in the wild, survival doesn't belong to the strongest or the smartest. It belongs to the one who refuses to quit. Damian returned a different man. His story is a reminder that even in the worst conditions, there is always a chance. And the one thing that stays with you, no matter what, is hope.